Queensland's been hailed the Wild West when it comes to strata law. This follows a Four Corners expose which led to a tsunami of complaints in this state about secret kickbacks and overcharging. Now, the LNP government is under pressure to introduce tough new laws. The former commissioner, whose job it was to police them, says he could do little because they're so lax.
There's no government inspectors, there's no strata cops on the beat in Queensland. I think that's a real problem. So it's not like other government agencies where they send out an inspector and do a spot check, issue a fine, make sure compliance is happening. None of that happens in Queensland.
Chris Irons says anyone can become a manager with little fallout, even if they're caught fudging the books.
It means that tomorrow you or I could go out there and say, I'm a strata manager now. I would like your work. I would also like to be a signatory to your bank account and have control over it. And there's no regulation over that. There's no character requirements. There's no training minimums as well.
We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars being managed by around 55,000 body corporates with no trust accounts, not even any licensing required.
You quickly think, did I make a mistake of buying into this resort? You know, what have I done here?
Retiree Michael Dopking spent years fighting his body corporate at Hope Island for access to the accounts.
We wanted to have access to the bank accounts, and it turned out that the strata manager claimed that the bank accounts where the money for the body corporates held was actually their accounts. And it turned out that was so, because what happened was the strata manager opened the bank accounts and held the body corporate monies in those bank accounts. So the strata manager was actually the signatory to all the accounts. So when we approached the bank as a committee to ask to see the accounts, we were told, no, we don't have access to those accounts because they're not actually in your name, they're actually in the strata manager's name. It was our money, our community money, we're talking millions of dollars.
Now, over many months, Four Corners heard from thousands of people frustrated with companies supposed to help them care for their most important assets, which is their homes and investment properties. Sobering complaints, and they were very well credentialed. Gold Coast resident Chris Griffith was one of the many frustrated by the lack of accountability.
This is an amazing finding here. In this case, there appears to have been a wholesale failure of even a basic level of appropriate and transparent decision making and record keeping over an extended period.
Gold Coast resident Chris Griffith says even with a QCAT win, which found his buildings committee invested more than $1 million in a procedural vacuum, and with the lack of records, got tied up in an appeal.
So there's a case in point where there is an adjudication process, but even if you win the adjudication, it doesn't necessarily mean you've won the day at all.
Now, Fair Trading says, look, there are conflict of interest and disclosure requirements, as well as a mandatory code of conduct.
It has no consequence, though. It has no teeth, so it means nothing, essentially. It might be that there are some contractual implications for them later down the track, but because they're contractual, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to pursue anything of that nature. There's very little consequence out there at the moment for anything that might be not great.
If we don't have much stricter law around the operation of the body corporates, we're going to have story after story of greed and misuse of funds.
The ex-commissioner says tough regulation, including huge fines like we see in New South Wales, is an absolute must.
I think it's time for government to put their money where their mouth is. They're very happy to take money from property transactions, devoting even a tiny percentage of some of that to go back into the strata sector for education, for information, for regulation, for strata cops on the beat. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.